When I heard her sleepy voice, I knew what I wanted to do. "Sweetheart, I have a couple of surprises. I am moving to LA. Will you fly up to Oakland as soon as you can tomorrow morning? We could drive down south together. There's something we need to talk about." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, I'd love to. I'll be on the 8 a.m. plane." A longer pause. "What do you want to talk about, Danny?" "It's something I should ask you in person, but I'll give you a hint. It's about sharing our lives, and about babies, and waking up in the mornings hugging." A longer pause ensued. "Linda." Her voice quivered. "Dan, I can't talk now. I'll fly up early tomorrow. I'll meet you at the PSA gate. Bye, Linda." By Danny. Then there was the lonely buzz on the line. I arrived at the gate by 8:45 a.m. She was already standing there, bright-eyed, a beauty with dazzling red hair. She ran up to me, laughing, and threw her arms around me. "Ooh, it's good to hold you again, Danny." I could feel the warmth of her body radiate into mine. We walked quickly to the parking lot, not finding any words at first. I drove back up to Tilden Park and turned right, climbing to Inspiration Point. I had it all planned. I asked her to sit on the fence, and was about to pop the question, when she threw her arms around me and said yes, and began to cry. Was it something I said? I joked feebly. We were married in the Los Angeles Municipal Courthouse in a beautiful private ceremony. Part of me felt very happy, another part was unaccountably depressed. I awoke in the middle of the night, and gently tiptoed out to the balcony of our honeymoon suite. I cried soundlessly. Why did I feel as if I had lost something, as if I had forgotten something important? The feeling was never to leave me. We soon settled into a new apartment. I tried my hand at selling life insurance. Linda got a part-time job as a bank teller. We were comfortable and settled, but I was too busy to devote much time to my new wife. Late at night, when she was sleeping, sat in meditation. Early in the morning I would do a few exercises. But before long my job responsibilities left me little time for such things. All my training and discipline began to fade. After 6 months of sales work, I had had enough. Sat down with Linda for our first good talk in many weeks. "Honey, how do you feel about moving back up to Northern California and looking for different work?" "If that's what you want to do, Dan, it's okay with me. Besides, it might be nice to be near my folks. They're great babysitters." "Babysitters?" "Yes. How do you feel about being a father?" "You mean a baby?" "You, me, a baby?" I hugged her very gently for a long time. I couldn't make any wrong moves after that. The second day up north, Linda visited her folks, and I went job hunting. I learned from my ex-coach Hal that the men's coaching position for gymnastics was open at Stanford University. I interviewed for the job that day and drove up to my in-laws to tell Linda the news. When I arrived, they said I had received a call from the Stanford athletic director and had been offered the coaching job to begin in September. I accepted. I'd found a career just like that. In late August, our beautiful daughter, Holly, was born. I drove all our belongings up to Menlo Park and moved us into a comfortable apartment. Linda and the baby flew up 2 weeks later. We were contented for a time, but I was soon immersed in my job, developing a strong gymnastics program at Stanford. I ran for miles through the golf course early each morning, and often sat alone on the shore of Lake Lagunita. Again, my energies and attention flew in many directions, but sadly, not in Linda's. A year went by almost without my noticing it. Everything was going so well, I couldn't understand my persistent feeling that I had lost something a long time ago. The sharp images of my training with Socrates, running into the hills, the strange exercises late at night, the hours of talking and listening and watching my enigmatic teacher, were fading memories. Not long after our first anniversary, Linda told me she wanted us to see a marriage counselor. It came as a complete shock, just when I felt we'd be able to relax and have more time together. The marriage counselor did help, yet a shadow had come between Linda and me. Maybe it had been there since our wedding night. She had grown quiet and private, drawing Holly with her into her own world. I came home from work each day totally spent, with too little energy left for either of them. My third year at Stanford, I applied for the position of faculty resident in one of the university residence halls, so that Linda could be with other people. It soon became apparent that this move had worked only too well, especially in the arena of romance. She had formed her own social life, and I had been relieved of a burden I could not, or would not, fulfill. Linda and I were separated in the spring of my third year at Stanford. I delved even deeper into my work, and began my inner search once again. Sat with the Zen group in the mornings in our gym. I began to study Aikido in the evenings. I read more and more, hoping to find some clues or directions, or answers to my unfinished business. When I was offered a faculty position at Oberlin College, a residential liberal arts college in Ohio, it seemed like a second chance for us. But there I only pursued my personal search for happiness with more intensity. I taught more gymnastics, and developed 2 courses, Psychophysical Development and Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which reflected some of the perspectives and skills I'd learned from Socrates. At the end of my first year there, I received a special grant from the college to travel and do research in my chosen field. After a troubled marriage, Linda and I separated, leaving her and my young daughter behind. Set off on what I hoped would be my final search. I was to visit many places around the world: Hawaii, Japan, Okinawa, India, and elsewhere, where I encountered some extraordinary teachers and schools of yoga, martial arts, and shamanism. I had many experiences and found great wisdom, but no lasting peace. As my travels neared their conclusion, I became even more desperately compelled toward a final confrontation with the questions that rang out in my mind. What is enlightenment? When will I find peace? Socrates had spoken of these things, but at the time, I didn't have the ears to hear him. When I arrived in the fishing village of Cascais on the coast of Portugal, the last stop on my journey, the questions continued to replay themselves endlessly, burning deeper into my mind. One morning I awoke on an isolated stretch of beach, where I had camped for a few days. My gaze drifted to the water, where the tide was devouring my painstakingly constructed castle of sand and sticks. For some reason, this reminded me of my own death, and what Socrates had tried to tell me. His words and gestures played back in bits and pieces, like the twigs from my castle, now scattered and floating in the shallow surf. Consider your fleeting years, Danny. One day you will discover that death is not what you might imagine, but then, neither is life. Either may be wondrous, filled with change, or, if you do not awaken, both may turn out to be a considerable disappointment. His laughter rang out in my memory. Then I remembered an incident in the station. I had been acting lethargic. Socrates suddenly grabbed me and shook me. Wake up. If you knew for certain you had a terminal illness, if you had little time left to live, you would waste precious little of it. Well, I am telling you, Dan, you do have a terminal illness, a test called birth. You don't have more than a few years left. No one does. So be happy now without reason, or you never will be at all. I began to feel a terrible sense of urgency, but there was nowhere to go. So I stayed, a beachcomber who never stopped combing through his own mind.